You're at a gathering, and someone suggests taking a group photo. Most people shift into position, adjusting their posture, angling their face. But there's always one person who steps back, not dramatically, just quietly. They might hold up a hand with a small smile, or suddenly become very interested in their phone, or offer to be the one taking the picture instead. And here's what's interesting about that moment. It's not just about avoiding the camera. Watch their body language in the seconds before and after. There's often a subtle shift in their physical presence that reveals something deeper about how they experience the world. Research on nonverbal communication suggests that people who consistently avoid being photographed often display distinct patterns in their everyday body language. Not because they're uncomfortable with themselves, but often because they've developed a different relationship with how they occupy space and attention. Start with their physical positioning in social settings. Many people who avoid photos tend to position themselves slightly to the side of group conversations rather than at the center. Not withdrawn exactly, but positioned where they can observe and participate without being the focal point. Psychologists studying proxemics, the study of personal space, have found that this lateral positioning is associated with what's called peripheral participation. It's a way of being present without demanding visual attention. Their hand gestures tend to be measured. While some people use expansive gestures that draw the eye, those who avoid cameras often keep their movements closer to their body. Not because they're insecure, but because they're less focused on visual performance. Their communication style leans more towards substance than spectacle. Watch their eye contact. This is where things get nuanced. Many people assume that avoiding photos means avoiding eye contact, but research suggests the opposite is often true. People who don't seek visual validation through photographs frequently maintain more sustained, genuine eye contact in conversations. They're not performing connection, they're experiencing it. Their attention isn't split between the person in front of them and how they might look to an imagined audience. There's something about their posture, too. It's often more neutral, less posed. Think about how most people unconsciously adjust their stance when they sense a camera might be pointed their way. Shoulders back, chin at a certain angle, a particular expression. People who avoid photos don't have that automatic postural shift. Their resting state is their only state. What you see in person is what you get, without the layer of self-presentation that comes with being photographed regularly. Studies on self-presentation theory show that people who are less invested in visual documentation often have what researchers call lower impression management behavior. That doesn't mean they don't care how they come across. It means they're less focused on controlling their image and more focused on authentic interaction. Their body language reflects this. There's often a quality of physical ease, even in formal settings, because they're not mentally cataloging how each moment might look as a frozen image. Consider their facial expressions. People who regularly post photos often develop what some psychologists informally call camera-ready expressions. Slight variations on a smile or look they know works well in pictures, but people who avoid being photographed tend to have more varied, less rehearsed expressions. Their face responds more directly to what they're feeling in the moment, without the filter of how that expression might be captured. There's something unguarded about it. Now, this isn't about one approach being better than the other. It's about understanding what these patterns might indicate. Research on self-concept and identity suggests that people who are less visually documented often have what's called a more internalized sense of self. Their identity is less tied to how they appear and more connected to how they experience things. And that shows up in their physical presence. They're often more comfortable with stillness too. In social situations where there's a lull in conversation, many people fill the space with movement or checking their phone. But those who aren't habitually creating or consuming visual content seem more at ease just being present. Their body language doesn't signal discomfort with empty space. They can simply exist without performing existence. But let's acknowledge the complexity here. Not everyone who avoids photos has this particular body language profile. Some people avoid cameras because of genuine social anxiety, and their body language might show signs of tension, restricted movement, or protective postures. Others might avoid photos due to past trauma, religious beliefs, or cultural reasons, and their physical presence could vary widely depending on context. The people we're talking about here are specifically those whose body language suggests they're comfortable in their own skin, just not interested in documenting it. The distinction matters. One is about discomfort with self. The other is about disinterest in performance. Interestingly, people who avoid being photographed often seem more attentive to other people's body language. When you're not focused on how you look, you tend to notice more about how others are presenting themselves. Researchers studying attention and perception have found that reduced self-focus often correlates with increased social awareness. These individuals might pick up on subtle shifts in posture or tension that others miss because they're not dividing their attention between the interaction and their own image management. Their physical boundaries tend to be clearer too, not rigid but defined. They're often comfortable saying no to things they don't want to do, without lengthy explanations or apologetic body language. When they decline to be in a photo, there's usually a calm certainty to it. No excessive hand-waving or nervous laughter, just a simple response paired with body language that isn't defensive or apologetic. Here's something researchers have observed about group dynamics. In settings where photos are being taken, people unconsciously orient toward the photographer, creating a performance space. But the person who doesn't want to be photographed often maintains their original orientation, staying engaged with whatever they were doing before. Their body language doesn't shift to accommodate the camera's presence. It's a small thing, but it reveals a different priority system. One pattern that emerges in research on digital behavior and embodiment is that people who are less visually documented often have a more integrated sense of their physical self. They're not compartmentalizing their body into flattering angles and less flattering ones. Their body language reflects a wholeness, an acceptance of how they look from all perspectives, because no single perspective is being prioritized or preserved. Studies on authenticity and self-concept suggest that people with less fragmented self-presentation, meaning their private self and public self are more aligned, often display more consistent body language across different contexts. They're physically similar whether they're with family, friends, or colleagues because they're not managing different versions of themselves. People who avoid photos often fall into this category. Their body language doesn't shift dramatically based on audience, because their sense of self isn't audience-dependent. Understanding these body language patterns isn't about judging whether it's better to embrace or avoid photography. It's about recognizing that different approaches to self-presentation create different ways of physically inhabiting the world. Neither is inherently superior. They're just different strategies for navigating social space. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, it might explain why you sometimes feel out of sync with the rhythm of social situations that revolve around image capture. Your body is operating on a different frequency, one that's less about how moments look and more about how they feel. That's not a deficiency, it's a difference. And if you're someone who enjoys photography and notices these patterns in others, maybe this offers a different lens. That person who steps out of frame isn't necessarily insecure or antisocial. They might just be more comfortable with their physical presence being temporary, experienced rather than archived. The body tells stories about our relationship with visibility, attention, and identity. People who avoid photos are telling a story about presence without performance, about being seen in the moment rather than in pixels. Their body language is the text of that story, written in posture and gesture and the particular way they occupy space. Maybe try this as an experiment. Next time you're in a social situation, spend some time without thinking about how you look or might be captured. Notice if your body relaxes in different ways. Notice if your attention shifts. You might find that your physical presence changes when you're not considering its documentation, or you might not. Either way, the awareness itself is worth something.